that some of the silent experts who examined it in secret once murmured might be traces of human blood. This letter was never meant to exist. It is the confession of a girl barely 14 years old. A girl the world planned to present as history's newest darling in a single glittering night, only for that night to collapse into a horror so severe that her innocence died before morning. And in the place where it once lived, something colder began to breathe, something shaped like revenge. Her name was Catherine de' Medici, a young Florentine sent to France as a piece in a game played by kings and popes. She had been raised to believe that marriage would open the door to safety, prestige, and power. She entered the royal palace thinking the bridal chamber would hold ritual, gentleness, and the promise of a noble future. What waited for her was not love. It was humiliation, planned down to the last detail. Yes, her body was harmed that night, but the deeper wound was to her dignity. Surrounded by muffled laughter and cruel whispers, Catherine felt something inside her break, an invisible thread tying her heart to the bright, sheltered world of childhood. When it snapped, it left behind a hard knot of rage, a fury that would not soften with time. Records uncovered much later claim that 23 high-born men watched from hidden slits and secret corridors, as though they were attending a private theater of suffering. None of them understood that one day every one of them would pay for what they had seen. Years later, they would begin to die, one after another, by poison, and all of them would fall to the same woman, the girl whose blood-tinged tears had once shone in candlelight while they watched in silence. Catherine kept a hidden journal. Page after page, she wrote down names, dates, methods, even the final moments of the lives she intended to erase. That wedding night did not simply make her a wife. It forged something else entirely. A strategist, a woman capable of turning pain into the precise mathematics of vengeance. And if something in this story unsettles you, if it stirs that forbidden curiosity that makes you lean closer, you are not alone. Very few will stay with a story like this until the end. Most prefer the neat version told by official history, the polished version that hides brutality behind velvet curtains and marble halls. But to understand how deep this tragedy goes, we have to return to October 25th, 1533. The palace at Marseille glittered with silk, brocade, and jewels. The rich scent of feast tables drifted through the halls. Outside, the streets pulsed with music, wine, and celebration as crowds rejoiced over the union between France and the powerful Médicis family. Everything looked radiant. But inside the palace, in the most elegant corridors, something darker was being prepared. Centuries later, archivists would uncover scattered notes about an old custom reserved for foreign brides at the French court. They called it a purification. It never appeared in official records. It passed only by whisper, an ugly secret shared among the oldest nobles over cups of wine and knowing glances. Catherine, fresh into her 14th year, knew nothing about it. She walked through torchlit stone corridors, the flames throwing restless shadows across the tapestries. Her hands were damp beneath her silk gloves, though her face stayed calm, the same composed expression taught to her by the nuns of Santa Lucia. But beneath that stillness, fear trembled quietly. She believed her first intimate moment would reflect the dignity of a royal marriage. She did not know the ritual awaiting her had been designed not to unite, but to break. Inside the bridal chamber stood the groom, Henry of Orleans, only 15 years old. He had the strong body of a young prince, the face of a boy, and a mind completely surrendered to the woman who ruled his desires. Diane Dare, 34, brilliant, magnetic, and utterly in control. Diane did not simply influence Henry. She choreographed him. She instructed his gestures, his words, even the rhythm of the night, making sure the humiliation would be complete. Henry obeyed like a puppet, and hidden in the structure of the palace were narrow spying passages, secret slits cut into the walls so others could watch without being seen. Through them, 23 noblemen gathered in the shadows. Eyes gleamed with sick anticipation. Some drank wine, some made whispers and wagers about how long the young Italian girl would endure before she collapsed. They were not innocent spectators. They were accomplices. What followed was worse than anything Catherine could have imagined. At first, the gestures were almost gentle, designed to lower her guard. Then the room filled with violence, physical, spiritual, and total. Catherine cried out in Italian. She begged for mercy. Her pleas vanished into the walls while laughter slipped back through the cracks. The trauma was so severe that the tiny vessels around her eyes burst. There is a rare condition in which tears mix with blood. Hemochrya. That night, Catherine's tears ran red. Henry shifted between false tenderness and sudden brutality, dragging the ordeal out with deliberate cruelty. 3 separate times, the court physician, Antoine Dubois, was summoned to revive her after she fainted. And each time she regained consciousness, the darkness around her felt closer, circling like vultures around wounded prey. By dawn, the girl who had entered that chamber was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who memorized every face, every laugh, every voice hidden in the half-light. Someone who would one day turn humiliation into a weapon. Morning in Marseille brought no comfort. It only revealed what had changed. The shy girl who had arrived in France carrying the fragile hopes of childhood was gone. In her place stood a young woman still wrapped in silk and lace, but with something newly sharpened in her gaze, something no teacher, no nun, no courtier had ever seen before. For days, Catherine barely spoke. She moved slowly through the corridors, quiet as a shadow, watching everything. She noticed who avoided her eyes. She noted who smiled too easily. She listened to the tone of every greeting, every false kindness, every carefully hidden insult. No one understood that her silence was not weakness. It was calculation. The shame she had been forced to swallow did not disappear. It hardened. It crystallized into purpose. Every pain, she told herself, would one day be returned. Everything she had learned at Santa Lucia now took on a darker meaning. She knew Latin, philosophy, history. She had studied the beginnings of alchemical practice through her aunt's teachings. By the age of 12, she could already speak 5 languages and follow the tangled rivalries of European courts more clearly than many seasoned diplomats. She understood herbs, infusions, distillations, substances that could heal, and substances that could kill. What had once been education became inventory. Her husband, Henry of Orleans, saw almost none of this. His world still revolved around Diane's presence, her approval, her voice. He continued to think of Catherine as harmless, meek, and easy to overlook. And Catherine learned the lesson that mattered most in royal courts. Never show your true intentions until the perfect moment arrives. So she smiled when etiquette demanded it. She accepted small humiliations without protest. She built useful friendships. At banquets, festivals, and formal audiences, she listened more than she spoke. She followed gossip like a map. She traced rivalries, weaknesses, loyalties. All the while, she carried the memory of that night like a blade hidden under velvet. In the privacy of her rooms, she kept her journal. Into its pages, she wrote every witness name in dark ink. Beside each one, she added notes with chilling precision, gestures, words, where each man had stood, how each had watched, who laughed first, who whispered, who drank. This was not memory for memory's sake. It was a ledger of sentences waiting to be carried out. To the French court, Catherine was simply the foreign bride adapting to her new life. But inside her, something was growing, fed by humiliation, sharpened by patience, sustained by the belief that justice, when denied by the world, could be made by one's own hand. 3 years passed before she made her first move. 3